OK, first things first, do you agree with this ruling?
No. No, I think it's deeply flawed on its own logical terms. So let's see one of the, and I think that whilst I think the good people of Epping will feel very aggrieved, I think the district council who did everything they could will feel very aggrieved, but I'm going to add another man to the list, and I think Mr. Justice Eyre has every right to feel aggrieved by this, frankly, dismissing of his 120-paragraph reasoned judgment, where he went through everything. They were very rude to him on his conclusions. They were rude to him because he didn't let the Home Office join. Now, in all the other preceding cases that had happened before this, the Home Office didn't join. Okay, so it's not normal for the Home Office to try and join. The Home Office was aware of this and didn't join at any correct point in time. He had the hearing and then on a Friday and gave judgment. So the interim case is finished. And then the Home Office make an application on the Monday to join, effectively to relitigate the hearing that they'd had on the Friday. I think he quite rightly said, go trot on. I mean, that's clearly incompetent from the Home Office, but he was criticised for that. And so it was suggested that because he hadn't had the benefit of their wisdom, he had made errors himself. But there's a a very rude logical error that I think your viewers and listeners can go through quite simply. Firstly, they've lumped all the protesters together. Okay, so the busting Antifa protesters, who are clearly, something is behind them, and they are violent and agitators, they're lumped together with the concerned mums that we can see on screen now. Now, that's not fair, and they commit violence. And so the judge has said, all protesters together, and by the way, some of the protesters are violent, so they're all bad. And he said that the judge made a mistake in granting the injunction because that incentivized more protests. Now, that's factually inaccurate, Patrick. After the injunction was granted, they stopped protesting at Epping. So it's just not true. The granting of an injunction did not incentivise more protests.
Oh, Stephen, can I just come in on that? Because I actually think that's a really, really interesting point. I was listening to that ruling, as you would expect, just out here before. And that stood out to me, this idea that, well, we cannot be seen to have protests driving government policy. But I went to Epping, to that Bell Hotel, the day that the injunction was granted, and the only people there were locals, and a lot of women, a lot of younger people. There was no stand-up to racism. There was nothing of it whatsoever. So you are, I believe, right to make the point that actually the protests had stopped, hadn't they?
Yes.
So that's not a. Do you think that this judge, which we might come on to actually in a second, Lord Justice Bean, might have erred there a little bit?
Yes, I think he has, and I think being very rude to Mr. Justice Eyre, who was the first instance judge, doesn't really cover that up. This is logically irrational. Also, let's just admit it on telly now. The actions of Lord Justice Bean are going to incentivise more protest this weekend. If he's claiming to be the one shutting down protest, that's not what's going to happen. He doesn't seem to understand normal human beings. And I worry that we have a self-selecting elite that simply don't seem to understand ordinary human beings. Obviously, the people in Epping are now going to be really upset. Obviously, they are going to protest. I think they will do so lawfully, because I've seen the good people of Epping, and I think wearing pink T-shirts is very wise. I personally advise them to take chocolate digestive biscuits and to give those to police officers to make it very clear they are angry at disconnected elite figures like Lord Justice Bean, not angry at individual police officers who are just doing their duty and keeping everybody safe. So I think we can have lawful protest, and it's actually a really dishonest and frankly cruel thing for Lord Justice Bean to have done, to lump all the protesters together.
Fine. Now, can I just come in again there? Because actually, yet again, Stephen, I think you make a great point, which is that, look, anyone with a brain in their head is now going to have fears and concerns that an already incredibly tense situation that looked as though maybe there'd been a light at the end of the tunnel dangled in front of people, which has now been snuffed out, could obviously have some consequences. And, every single person wants whatever demonstration or whatever is done, whether it's at the Bell Hotel or anywhere else, in fact, this coming weekend, to be done in a very, very peaceful way. And it's important to make that incredibly clear. And for people not to let themselves down, because a lot of people are going to be out there now waiting for something really bad to happen and use that up as some kind of straw man argument to then tarnish everybody else as well. There is a point that I want to make, and I want to be very, very clear on this before I ask you this question, Stephen. I read an article that you wrote last night, and I read it with great interest. And it was about Lord Justice Bean. Now, the thing I want to be clear about is that we have to believe in this country that anybody who is in Lord Justice Bean's position is completely beyond reproach, they are completely neutral, and that their judgment is based, on any case, singly around their interpretation of the law or just the law itself. So I don't want to be seen like to be implying anything here. But you raise certain questions that about the perception of him and just some facts about his past. And I just wondered if you might be able to just run us through what some of those things were that you noticed.
Yes, so I'm not raising... We have two types of bias in law, and with that, one is actual bias and one is the perception of bias. I'm not saying that there is actual bias. I mean, if anything, having listened to the judgment, I think Lord Justice Bean got it wrong because his logic is utterly flawed. So I'm not saying he's biased, I'm just saying his logic is completely flawed. But there is then the perception of bias, and that has two limbs. So the first limb is quite obvious. It's said to be when a judge is acting as the judge in his own case. So if the dispute was about who owned his house, then that judge would obviously have the perception of bias. If it's about shares he's interested in or a company that he's a part owner of, obviously the judge should recuse themselves and not sit on that because there's a perception of bias, even if there's no real bias. That's very important. And what I've said is that with Lord Justice Bean's political connections, which are more than just Labour Party membership, although that was for 28 years, he led the Fabian Society, which is a subset of Labour, which is currently in power, currently the philosophy of the government. And there are a number of other connections I've set out, that the second limb risks very, very firmly being fulfilled on the perception of bias, which is where the judge looks like a friend to one of the parties in the case. And that party would obviously be the government, which is run by the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, whose policy it is to challenge us, to keep the migrants in the hotel. So I do worry that there is a perception of bias. On the judgment, Patrick, there's one other outrage I really want to flag to you if we've got time. And that's that the judge says, the tin-earedness of this, the government said that not everybody's equal and the migrants' rights are more important than the residents', basically. And the judge, I think quite rightly, maybe his mind was turned on correctly at that point, that was an unattractive argument. But then he went on to say that the residents of Epping who are afraid of crime, very, very serious crimes which have been alleged and which could occur. So these mums and girls they're not hysterical. These are valid claims. He said that they are relevant, but that they are outweighed by the needs of the government and the migrants. Now, I just think that is an absolutely outrageous thing to do, because that is a clear hierarchy of rights. It is, if my white rights outweigh yours, then I'm higher up in a hierarchy. So they're doing this thing where they say this isn't happening, and anyway, it's a good thing, which I just don't understand whether they know that they're doing it deliberately, whether it's purely accidental. I don't understand where this comes from, but it seems to be part of left-wing philosophy, which this judge is steeped in. And this, again, gives rise to the perception of bias. I really wish that another judge had heard this case, because we need people to have trust and faith and confidence in our judges. I do.
How is it decided what judges hear which cases, Steve?
Well, it's pretty opaque now. And since the Blair reforms, it's all got a bit confused. I suspect it's ultimately with the Lady Chief Justice, but I also suspect that the Court of Appeal just has rotas. I mean, take a look, just to be practical, Patrick, this is August. Most judges will be on holiday right now. So there won't be many.
I hate hearing this. Like, the world stops in August. You know what I mean? Oh, sorry, we couldn't do this because it's August. Or sorry, I'm sorry, if you're the Home Secretary, you don't have to go interrailing with your husband during August. You don't have to do it at all, especially if your husband happens to be Ed Balls, of course. And we've got a shortage of everything. The world doesn't stop. We're all at work. Most people watching and listening to this now will have done a bit of work this morning. I might be going to work this evening. The world does not stop because it's August. But just on that, sorry, Stephen, Nigel Farage is coming out and saying that this is the government using the ECHR against its own people,
yes.
and arguing that the rights of illegal immigrants trump the rights of Brits. Our last guest, Matthew Stadlen, whilst I could hear him, was saying that, look, this is a populist argument. It's not true. Ultimately, the government has the statutory duty to house these people. Who's right there? Is Nigel Farage right to say that the government used the ECHR against its own people and that now the rights of illegal immigrants are worth more than the rights of Brits?
Yes, well, Nigel is clearly right. Nigel, in your summary, and I don't know if these were his exact words, says that the rights of the migrants trump the rights of the residents of Epping. Well, in the words of the judge, they outweigh the rights and interests of the... So I don't see how you can argue that that isn't a hierarchy of rights. If you have any commitment to formal logic and telling the truth, then I don't see how you can argue against that. And in terms of what's going on, again, don't let them hide, Patrick. They only have a statutory duty because they gave themselves one. They only have an obligation in international law because they gave themselves one. They can take it away. So this is just nonsense. This is our government is acting like a child. Oh, I can't control things. I'm not in charge. I don't really run the country. And that sort of ran through this judgment today, Patrick. There was a lot of pathetic, well, if we move the migrants on, where would they go to? And what if we didn't have more capacity for more migrants in our hotels? It's like, why do we have migrants in our hotels? We don't have to, Patrick. We don't have to run this way. Don't let them ever argue that the law makes them do anything, because they have fundamental control over what the law is. Okay, now they might get it wrong. They might mess up like the last government did with the Rwanda plan, where they got it technically wrong. So the Supreme Court had to go, basically, I'm terribly sorry, but you have not drafted this properly. Go away and try again. You do actually have to draft law very well. It's complicated and technical. I always think the greatest analogy is computer code, because I think a lot of people understand that if you draft computer code badly, you'll get a really buggy piece of software, be that a game or a processor or whatever, you'll get bugs. And literally, we sort of get legal bugs when laws are badly drafted, and that's what the Rwanda plan was. That's why it was rejected. But ultimately, they are in control. And ultimately, the government needs to do something and stop saying the bigger boy did it and then left the mess for me. And I can't do anything for years and years and years and years and years because something reasons. Just do something.
Well, look, Stephen, thank you. Thank you very, very much. I suspect this won't be the last time we talk in the next few days anyway, but all the best. Stephen.